Math 3, Unit 7, final review. Today we're talking about parabolas and circles. So first of all, the circle definition is set of all points equidistant from a given point. The general form for the equation of a circle is written here for you. So I'm just going to highlight it. Where HK is the center and R is the radius. So remember, we always set each of these parentheses equal to 0, and that gives us our x and y value for the vertex. And then you take the square root of r squared, which gives you the radius. So we have a couple examples here where you just want to know what is the center and what is the radius. So on this first one here, what is my center? 2, -1. And then my radius would be the square root of 64, which is 8. Okay, next one, what is my center? Good, -5, 8. And my radius is going to be
2.
Very good. And then knowing that information, we can work backwards. And so we want to write the equation if my center is -2, 1 and my radius is 5. How would I write that? Good. X plus 2 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals perfect. And that is the equation for a line, or sorry, for a circle. Okay, so the equation of a circle will have both an x squared term and a y squared term. If the equation is not in standard form, then use the method of completing the square to help you get the equation into that form. So we need to complete the square. Do you guys remember how to rewrite this?
Oh yeah, x squared plus 8x. And then
Bless you. Plus blank.
yeah.
Good.
Y
And then-
minus y 6y.
Very good. Then we're going to put all the y's together. So we have plus y squared minus 6y plus blank. And then any value that is not a y or an x goes the other side. And so we have equals -3. And then what else do I need? So if we're adding a value, good. You have to also add it to the other side in order to balance it out. And so since I have 2 blanks on the left side, I need 2 blanks on the right side. Now, do you guys remember how to complete the square? Good.
Divided by 2.
Very good. You take that middle number 8 and we divide it by 2. We always divide it by 2. And we get 4. And then what do I do with that? We square it, which is, and that's the value that goes into each of those first blanks. Now remember that this x squared plus 8x plus 16, it's factoring to be a square. So you don't normally do this, but I just want to remind you, your multiplying number is 16. Your adding number is 8. And so what two numbers multiply to be 16 and add to be 8? 4 and 4. It always ends up being that half number. And so this parenthesis ends up becoming x plus 4 squared because it'd be x plus 4 and x plus 4. That's the whole purpose of completing the square. Okay, now for the y term, we have -6, and we divide that by, which equals, and then when we square that, it is 9. So 9 is the value that goes in the second blank. So based on what we just talked about, what is this other square going to be? Very good. Very good. Y minus 3 squared equals, and over here we simplify all that. So we add it together and that makes 22. And so the question originally asked for the center and the radius. So now that we have it into the correct form here, we know that our center is what? negative 4, positive 3. And then this one, my radius would be the square root of 22. And if you break that down, you get 2 and 11, which doesn't make any pairs. And so your answer could just be like that. Do we have any questions? Okay, moving on to parabolas. So the definition for a parabola is the set of all points equidistant from a given line and point. Okay, also remember that we have the distance formula that will help us with writing the equation of parabolas based on our definition from the given line and a given point. And we have all this other information on how we find our focus and our directrix, and 4C helps us with that. Notice that our 4C is in each of those equations. If you need to, you can come back and look at all this, but we're just going to go ahead and apply it with what we're going to do with some problems. Any questions so far? Okay. So we have some graphs. The first one, say just to put it into descriptive form, state the vertex and the direction that the parabola opens. Okay, so is this in the correct form right now? No. So you're always looking to see what term is squared, and whichever term is squared, the opposite one is the one that you want to get by itself. So in this case, we want to get the y by itself. What will I do in order to get the y by itself? Very good. Add 4 to both sides. So we do that, and we get y equals negative 1 over 20, x plus 3 squared plus 4. So now that we have this equation, do we know the vertex? What is my vertex?
Negative 3, 4.
Good. Negative 3, 4. Do you know the direction of the graph?
Down.
Okay, the direction is down. So there's a couple things that tell us the direction, for those of you that don't remember. First of all, since it is y equals, that means it's going to curve with the y-axis, either curving up or down. And then we know it is down because my a value is negative. So we just have to plot our vertex on here, negative 3, positive 4. I normally always will put a V there to remind myself it's the vertex. And then because they didn't tell us we had to find the focus or directrix or anything else, we can just curve that going down and we're done. Okay. You guys ready for the next one? Is the next one in descriptive form? No. Okay, this time y is being squared. And so we want to get the x by itself, and I will do that by, good, subtracting 1 to both sides. We get x equals negative 4, parentheses, y plus 2 squared minus 1. Now I want you to think about your vertex on this one a little more, based on the equation being x equals versus y equals. Very good. It's going to be right or left because it's x equals. And it's specifically going to be left because it is negative. And so for direction, we know that it is going to go left. Right, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Okay, what is my vertex, though?
Negative 1, negative 2.
Very good. Negative 1, negative 2. Remember that whatever's in parentheses, we set that equal to 0. And right there would be telling me that y equals negative 2, so that goes in the y spot. And then the other one is our x. So we go negative 1, negative 2, make our point for our vertex. You already told me that this curves left, so we're just going to curve it going to the left. Any questions? Okay, we're ready to move on? Okay, this next part states to put the following into descriptive form. But now we need to state the vertex, focus, directrix, focal chord endpoints, and graph. Okay, so we have to do everything. which takes a little bit more work, but you guys got this. So what is being squared right now? The x, which means we want to get the y by itself. It is easiest when it is written like this to just divide both sides by 8, because this is being a whole quantity, so I can take the whole quantity and divide it by 8. So we divide by 8 to both sides. This cancels out, and we would write this as 1/8 because there's really a 1 in front. Parentheses x plus 3 squared equals y plus 1. What will we do next in order to get y by itself? Good. Subtract 1 to both sides. This cancels out. And I'm going to flip this around so I can have y on the left side. And we have y equals 1/8 x plus 3 squared minus 1. Good. So our equation is now in descriptive form. Based on that information, we know our vertex. What is our vertex? Very good. -3, -1. So let's go to our graph and let's go ahead and plot that. -3, -1. Make our point and mark it V for vertex. Yes. Can I what? Okay. What will be my next step? We need to find the focal chord endpoints and the focus and the directrix. How do we do that? If you don't remember, go back to the previous page, okay, where we had these notes for you. And you just have to know how to go backwards, which I'm having issues with. Okay, so how do I do that? What do we use? 4C equals the reciprocal of your leading coefficient. Okay, so if we go back here, we are going to write 4C equals, and what is the reciprocal here? You flip 1/8, which would make it 8. And we then divide by 4 to both sides and get C equals 2. Now, what direction is your graph going? So it's y equals, and why is it going down? Up. Y equals, so up or down, and then it's going up because this is positive. So I'm going to make a little note over here that this graph is going up. And so your focus is always inside the curve. So from my vertex, my focus is going to go up. We're going to go up 2. So we go up 1, 2, and I'm going to label that with an F for my focus. My directrix goes the opposite direction, so I'm going to go down 2. And then we make our directrix. Okay, and we can even write those values down here now. My focus is at what value? And what about my directrix? It's y equals -3, because it's a line going through that y-axis at -3. Okay? Now we need the focal chord endpoints. Who remembers how to get the focal chord endpoints? Very good. We double that value, which would make what? 4. So from the focus, you go 4 in each direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. Okay? Also, that whole distance should be the reciprocal of that A value, 8. And if you count it out, that does equal 8. And so now we can draw our curves. And we can state those ordered pairs for your focal chord endpoints. And in this case, they're at good 1, 1 and -7, 1. Any questions? Okay, next example. In order to get this into descriptive form, what do I need to do?
Add 1.
Good, just add 1 to both sides. We have x equals 1/2, and then y minus 2 squared plus 1. Based on this, what direction is this graph going to go?
Right.
Very good. And again, how do we know it's right?
Because it's x equals.
X equals, and it is positive. Okay, what is my vertex?
1, 2,
1, positive 2, correct? Y minus 2 equals 0. We get y equals 2. Okay, so let's plot that. Go right 1, up 2. Label that with a V for the vertex. How do I find the focus and directrix?
4C equals the reciprocal.
Very good. 4C equals the reciprocal of 1/2, which would make 2. And then we would
C equals 1.
divide by 4 to both sides, and we find that C does equal 1/2. So for the focus, where am I going to go? To the right 1/2, because it's going with our x-axis, correct? So right 1/2, and we're going to label that with F. And my directrix would go left 1/2, and we draw that line. And so what would we label those down here? The focus is at what value? 1.5. 2. And the directrix, how do we label the directrix? X equals. Perfect. Good job. X equals 1/2 is correct. And then how do I find our focal chord endpoints? Double 1/2, which would end up making 1. And so from the focus, we go up 1 and down 1. And then we can draw our curve that's going to end up going to the right. And our focal chord endpoints, 1.5, 1, and 1.5, 3. Any questions? Okay. Okay. This next one, they'd want us to change now these parabolas into descriptive form and then state the vertex and the direction. Okay. So first of all, whatever is being squared, the other term we want to end up getting by itself. But in this case, do you see how this is an x? And so we will go ahead and subtract 12x to get all of the x's together. When I do that, I get negative 11x equals y squared minus 2. Now, if I had a plain y term, we would have to complete the square. But do you see how there's no plain y term? So this, you could even think of it as being like y plus 0 squared. Okay, but I need to get x by itself. So what am I going to do?
Divide 11.
Good. Divide by negative 11 to every single term. Okay? When I do that, I get x equals, remember if there isn't a number in front, that's going to be a 1. So I have negative 1 over 11, y squared, and 2 negatives make a positive 2 over 11. So we can write it this way, or you could also think of it as x equals negative 1 over 11, y plus 0 squared plus 2 over 11, if you wanted to. Now, based on this information, what is my vertex?
0. 2 over 11 or 0.
2 over 11, 0. Okay? And then what direction? Very good. How do we know it's going left? Very good. X equals and it's negative. Okay. This next one, which variable do we want to get by itself? The y. What would be the easiest way to get y by itself? Add y. Good. So I'm going to add y to both sides, and I'm going to end up flipping this around. So I'm going to write this as y equals 5x squared minus 30x plus 2. Now, we want to complete the square in order to get our vertex. Can we have a coefficient in front of our x squared term when you're completing the square? No. Okay, so in order to complete the square with parabolas, it's a little different than circles, but we factor out the 5 first. And for those of you, most of you need to show your work of dividing by 5 because sometimes you forget to do it with that middle term. Okay, and you end up with x squared, and what's negative 30 divided by 5? Negative 6x, and then we're going to do plus our blank because we're going to complete the square there. plus 2 goes on the outside. And then remember, this is a balanced equation. Now this time when I'm balancing it, we're balancing everything on the same side. This is saying 5 times the blank. So what do I need to balance it? -5 times the blank. So this would, whatever this value is, if it was like 3, 5 times 3 is 15. In order to balance it, you would need a -5 times 3, which would give you a -15, right? So this is going to balance it out. The difference from the circles is that they were on opposite sides, so you did the same thing to both sides. Here, we're on the same side, so we have to do opposites. Okay, how do I complete the square? Good. -6 divided by 2 makes -3, and -3 squared is 9. So 9 is the value that goes into my blanks, and this value is what makes our square. Good. So we end up with y equals 5 x minus 3 squared, and then we simplify all of this, which is 2 minus 45, and what does that make? -43. Good. What is my vertex? Good. 3 -43 is correct. And then what is my direction? Up. And we know it's up because y equals, and it's positive. Any questions? Okay. Last couple examples. This is when we want to write the equation. Do you guys remember how we write the equation if we have the focus and directrix? Very good. PF equals PD. Our point is XY. And here our focus is 4, 0. Our point is still XY. And my directrix, they said x equals -4, so we put -4 in the x spot, and then we put y in the y spot. Is that good so far? Okay, and then we use our distance formula, which we highlighted on that other page. And our distance formula, because it's saying the distance from the point to the focus is the same as the distance from the point to the directrix. Okay, so we have x minus 4 squared. We are subtracting the x's. Plus, we subtract the y's. Y minus 0 squared. Equals. We do the same thing on the other side with our point and our directrix. So we have x minus a -4 squared. Plus y minus y squared. 2 negatives here make a positive, and what's y minus y?
0.
So this cancels out. Everybody good with that? Normally I'd rewrite this, but I'm going to save a little time and I'm not going to rewrite it. Is that okay? And how do we get rid of a square root? We square it. So I have to square both sides here in order to get rid of these square roots. Well, when I do that, the square root and the square, they end up eliminating. And so we end up with x minus 4 squared plus, and y minus 0 is, so we have y squared, equals, and then here I just have x plus 4 squared. Now remember that the like terms you multiply out and simplify. The one that's not like, you wouldn't multiply out. In this case, there's nothing to multiply out, but on our next example, there will be. Okay, so x minus 4 squared, we should be able to multiply that out in our heads. Because that's really saying x minus 4 times x minus 4, correct? Minus 8x, we have 2 -4s. -4 plus -4 is -8. And then -4 times -4 makes a positive 16. Plus we have our y squared equals, on the other side we get x squared plus 8x plus 16. D'Angelo, you're getting all this down? Okay. Remember that anything that is like on both sides could end up canceling out. Because if I were to subtract x squared here and over here, do you see how they would cancel out? So if they're exactly the same, just cancel them out. You don't have to take the time to do anything. What else is exactly the same? 16. And so what is not alike is that I still have left -8x plus y squared equals 8x. And what am I going to want to do? Very good. Add it 8x to both sides so we get all those together. And we have y squared equals 16x. And to get x by itself, we... Very good. And then you have your equation. X equals 1 over 16 y squared. Okay. Any questions? All right, last one. Same process. PF equals PD. So my point is what? XY. And the problem, my focus is what? Very good. 2, -1 equals. My point is XY. And here they told me the directrix is y equals 3. So where do I put that? In the y spot, and then that means we just put an x in the x spot. Okay, using our distance formula, okay, we have the square root, and it's going to be what?
X plus 2?
X minus 2 squared.
Oh,
Okay, oh, it's always subtracting.
Okay.
Plus, and then we're going to subtract the y, so it's going to be y minus -1 squared, which ends up making a positive. Do the same distance formula on the other side. We write that as x minus x squared plus, good, y minus 3 squared. What is x minus x? That one cancels out. Okay? And then we said these two make a positive. And then what am I going to do to get rid of the square root? Square both sides. So when I do that, I get x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared equals y minus 3 squared. Now, which ones am I going to multiply out? The y's. Whichever ones match, that's what we multiply out. This one I'm going to leave alone. Okay? And so I have x minus 2 squared plus, and what does this multiply out to be? Y squared plus 2y plus 1. 1 plus 1 makes 2. 1 times 1 multiplies to be 1. Okay, y minus 3 squared will multiply out to be? Perfect. Y squared minus 6y plus 9. Now what is like that I can cancel out? Y squareds. Okay. We want to get the plain variable by itself. So what are we going to end up wanting to get by itself?
Y.
The y's. Okay, so what should I do?
Subtract 2y.
Good. I would start by subtracting 2y. Do you guys want to simplify that and see what happens? No, you don't. Okay, too bad. All right, so we get x minus 2 squared plus 1 equals -8y plus 9. To get y by itself, what do I still need to do? Good, subtract 9. So that cancels. We have x minus 2 squared minus 8 equals -8y. And the last step would be to, very good, divide everything by -8. And I'm going to flip this around. It'll be written as y equals -1/8 x minus 2 squared. And -8 divided by -8 makes a +1. And that's your equation.